Good evening and welcome back to the Thursday, April 3rd, 2025 meeting of the school committee. We have just returned from executive session, and I would invite everybody here in the studio, which is just us at this point, to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so then first item on our agenda is public comment. I do not see anybody here for public comment, so we can move into if there are any recognitions.
Oh, the Hopkinton High Quiz Bowl team are moving on to the next round, I believe, right? I taped it because I missed it last year, so that was, I had to write myself a note. It's good. They almost didn't do it.
But
They
did.
really pulled it out at the end, which was great.
Anyone else? I did just want to recognize the community for all of the thoughtful input that we have received, for all the people who participated in the surveys, sent us emails, people who came to the coffee hours, and people who participated in the site visits as well as the in-district day. So thank you to everybody. That will be later discussed in our meeting. Reports. We do not have a student council member here tonight, so that brings us into the construction update.
Thank you. So for the project, both for Hopkins and for Charleswood, in terms of safety, in February, we did have 2 slip and fall events, one of which required a doctor's follow-up. And then in March, we had the masked climber collapse, which pushed down a wall of the gym. And that was discussed with you at a previous meeting by Vertex, our OPM. The schedule, the project is on schedule, still looking for our final completion in August of '26. The project is on budget. 86% has been committed to date. In terms of furniture, fixture, and equipment, technology, and security, BCM Controls, that's the security vendor. The pricing for that was approved by the school committee in February. We'll be looking to utilize E-Rate for the purchasing of our network components. And the team is reviewing the classroom technology procurement with a target date of April to bring also forward to the school committee for approval. Looking again at the construction site overview, the yellow area, the existing school and the play area, the driveway, loop, and parking in the gray. The new building is not highlighted right now, and the construction trailer's way off on the side. And just some pictures of the site. You can see the first picture is just an overview. This is progress along the west elevation. And then the gym, the view of the parapet framing and CMU block installation along the south elevation. The first picture, a view of the CMU block installation in progress in the gym and the light gauge metal framing installation on the exterior on the other side of the addition. The view of the hollow metal door frames set and the CMU block installation at level 1. And a picture of the view of the plumbing rough-in at level 2. So from a schedule update, progress this month, and again, this is looking back in the month of March. Roof truss and metal decking installation is in progress, parapet framing in progress, the light gauge metal framing of the walls and the windows, the CMU block installation in progress at the exterior gym walls and the interior bathroom walls, the hollow metal door frames set at the CMU wall locations, and the MEP rough-in is in progress at level 1. Next month, still looking to obtain the building permit. There is one issue that they are still working with. Continue the mock-up installation and testing. complete the roof truss and metal decking installation, complete the CMU block wall installation at the gym, commencing the exterior sheathing and the air vapor barrier, commencing the window installation and the TPO roof installation at the gym. Change order updates. At this time, we had an update for a radon mitigation system of $21,000, the water source heat pump at $21,000, some plumbing clarifications at $27,000, and a hydronic pump change, according to a submittal review at $1,300. So the total change orders so far is $71,000. Looking at the budget again, from an architect standpoint, expenditures to date is around 70%. The OPM's contract value is at 35%, and the construction contract is at 18%. And an update for Charleswood, the Conservation Commission has approved the street improvements. The ESBC has authorized the construction drawings to go to bid, and the project is trending $8.6 million under budget as of February estimates. The next major milestones, bidding of the documents will be put out in March and April. The construction contract award, we're looking for May of '25, with construction to begin in June or July. And again, just looking at the construction update overlay of the two, this has not changed from any of the updates that we've given.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. That moves us then into the superintendent's report.
Okay. There we go. So thank you. This is the superintendent's report for April 3rd, 2025. I have some great news. I have some not great news, and just a sampling of the ELA teamwork that we've been doing all year. So I'll start with the great news. Very frequently, I'll show you some of the artwork of our students when they have been scholastic winners. And what has happened this year is that we have had, I guess I would say, an inordinate number of pieces that have moved and received medals at the national level. So you can see Pascaline Tete, Maya Schnur, Macy McKibben, and Annabelle Liu. These are just two of the pieces, but those four artists had five altogether. So they will be honored at Carnegie Hall in New York City, and it's pretty exciting. So Colleen Janino, who is the subject matter leader for visual arts, was like kind of over the moon about this, and she should be. It's really.
Are they our first ones to get honored like that?
Well, we've had kids go to the national level in the past, but never this
Never.
many. Yeah.
Do we pay
Really
for their
nice.
trip?
I'm not sure who pays for the trip. I do know that when they submit their work to Scholastic, I think that the HPTO pays for the entry fees. Yeah,
That's amazing.
it sure is, yeah.
Some of those names look familiar, that we may have seen them.
Pascaline's work has been here before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were some of these things part of the high school art exhibit?
I'm sure that at the HCA?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I went up and looked at, and there was some incredible stuff there.
Yeah, we did as well. All right, and then Aritro Chatterjee and Josh Kim. Aritro plays the viola and Josh the clarinet. They were invited to perform at the state level, so Mass Music Educators Association, the MMEA, had their all-state festival on the 28th and 29th of March, and so they got to play in the orchestra and the concert band at Symphony Hall. So there's the good news. Now here's the not great news. So I did a little bit of digging into grants because a lot of people have been asking what's going to be happening with the dismantling of the USDOE to our grants. And so on March 14th, the Senate passed a full-year continuing resolution which included the level funding of most entitlement grants, including ESSA and the IDEA. However, the continuing resolution didn't contain designated amounts for all of the grants. So I thought I would show you what that looks like, I think, on a state level and then here in Hopkinton. So for Title I, which really addresses the needs of low-income students, in Massachusetts, we get $285 million. In Hopkinton, we get $117,218. Title IIA, which helps with teacher performance, so we do a lot of professional development with that. In Massachusetts, $30 million comes in, and in Hopkinton, $47,294. In Title III, which addresses the needs of our English learners, in Massachusetts, $20.5 million, and in Hopkinton, $35,842. So I have highlighted in that blue color just those 3 title grants. And so you can see that if those were to disappear, it would impact us less than $200,000. Certainly, we take that money and we put it to very, very good use every year, but less than $200,000 is not devastating as it might be in some other communities. However, when you look at the IDEA grant, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, so it's a special education grant, and we very often tell you that we're funding paraprofessionals out of the IDEA grant. In Hopkinton, that's just under $1 million. So that would be impactful. And there's nothing nothing that's concrete for FY '27. So you can see that FY '26 is there. Dollar amounts, we are not exactly sure of.
So I'm sorry, the FY '26, those are the amounts that the Senate is passed the CR on.
That is correct, yes. So they passed it for FY '26, but the amounts you see in that far right column are our FY '25 numbers. So we don't
Okay.
know what the FY
Okay.
'26 numbers will be yet.
Is there any indication that they would go up? Or is it likely they'll go down?
I don't think that they will go.
I figured
Yeah.
that, but I was thinking if they would be level.
Yes. One of the other issues, I think, is that, and you know, our low-income numbers go up and down here, and they are very low right now. So Title I is likely to go down.
In our English learner numbers have
Numbers
gone
have
down,
also come down, yes.
but our special education needs have not gone down.
Correct.
Any other questions on the grants?
When would we know?
We don't know.
We don't know when we'll know.
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
We don't get allocation notifications until usually around July.
Oh, okay, that's what I was looking for, thank you.
All right, and then because last year we spent so much time thinking about our math findings, I thought I'd just give you kind of a smattering of the work that our ELA team does. So over the past year, what we have been doing is we've been looking at an awful lot of data. We have reviewed student writing samples. We have considered what constitutes an evidence-based best practice. We talk about what we see in classrooms, and we get into a lot of classrooms and do walkthroughs. And I think one of the things that we believe now among this group is that rates of growth and achievement could be bolstered in Hopkinton with just adjustments to Tier 1 instructional practices. And that doesn't mean that we wouldn't do things with Tier 2 or Tier 3, but we spent a lot of time thinking about our Tier 1 practices. And Tier 1 just means, though, that's the kind of instruction that every kid gets. So historically, you know, you've seen these charts many times, and you know that we're about a 75% proficient kind of a district. So in grade 3, for example, I pulled those numbers, and the partially meeting expectations kids there are about like 21%, 22%, 20%, 25%. So you see a consistency in that number. Not meeting expectations, 3%, 3%, 3%, 2%. So the numbers there are very, very consistent. And I think you see the same thing when I pulled the grade 5, and I just chose those. But what we believe is that this is a community that could hit 85% proficiency if we just made those adjustments to our practice. So what do they look like? The data seems to be telling us that the instructional materials are secondary to the quality of instruction. And so how do we know that? There are some classrooms where the student growth percentile score is at 80% every single year. There are some classrooms where the student growth percentile score Is it 50% every single year? So we can watch how the impact of, instruction plays out in the classroom. We also wonder if, when people are planning lessons, they are setting 2 goals in ELA for each lesson. So, for example, there should be a literacy goal. For example, the purpose of this lesson falls under comprehension. Specifically, it's designed to grow students' abilities to draw inferences. So that's what we would be doing in terms of literacy. At the same time, we would need a goal so that we would say kids are gaining expertise in the actual literature. So the purpose of that lesson would be that we want kids to be able to access primary source documents. In this case, it's a diary, to identify its features, to discuss its merits, and that's really often how we read in social studies. So there's almost a disciplinary literacy goal embedded in there as well. If we were setting 2 goals like this with each lesson, we would be, we believe, making different kinds of gains. We talked a lot, especially with Sherry Kent, who is our K-5 ELA director, and you know that she came to us from the Hill, so she's done a lot of work on what does good reading instruction look like. And we often talk about whole group reading instruction, and that's tier 1 with differentiation as needed, and that should be happening in a classroom 4 to 5 days a week. Small group reading instruction should still be happening. It's tier 1, and that can be differentiated as well, and that should be 2 days a week. Sometimes we say, if this was tier 2, could we have a tier 2A and a tier 2B? And when we talk about tier 2A, what we mean is we're providing additional instruction, we're reteaching, we're practicing with skills for our students who are struggling, and they might do that little bit of additional work 1 or 2 days a week. And so if they're doing that, it is kind of tier 2 because they're getting something that not everybody else is getting, but it's still provided by the regular classroom teacher. And then we often talk about writing reps. We think that if kids are writing over and over and over again, they would not only become better writers, but they would become better readers because they are using writing in the service of reading learning. So when we talk about whole group instruction, one of the things that we've seen happen across the state of Massachusetts is that there are literacy programs that are now approved by DESE. And we wonder if that hasn't happened because, and you'll see this in the next column, when we are pulling kids for small group, it's hard to know the efficacy of what the kids who aren't getting the explicit instruction with the teaching, what is the efficacy of what those kids are doing. And so I think what happens is that we believe that if everybody is getting that same whole group instruction, then we're sure that everybody is getting explicit instruction. It may not be the perfect instruction for you, it's instruction nonetheless. And you know that the pendulum swings all the time in public education. So the belief about whole group reading instruction is it should have a connection to something previously taught. Kids should have that skill, the strategy, the literature, and the why up front. And the instruction needs to be super explicit. We're going to talk about what the skill is, what the strategy is. The teacher's going to model it. There's going to be the I do, we do, you do piece. There'll be lots of questions and queries, think alouds, turn and talk, follow-up activities in pairs or individually, but all of those things are best practices in whole group. I'm going to hold off on the small group because my big question with small group is what are the rest of the kids doing when kids are in their small group instruction? And with your small group instruction, that should be happening 2 or 3 times a week. The levels are adjusted to align with the Lexile score that's appropriate for that particular reader. And you are meeting with kids who have additional needs throughout the week. And then you have to have some kind of a tool to document student performance, growth, and any kind of additional supports that our kids need. So the last one is the writing. And what we're talking about here is, this is in addition to that kind of formal writing that we're doing, longer pieces, very formal pieces in the classroom. But if kids were doing these kind of quick writes every day or 3 to 5 times a week, the prompt just asks for a different kind of very small piece of writing. So it could be informational, it could be opinion, it could be narrative, it could be literary analysis. And the kids should be working on whatever current grammar or content or writing strategies, and those things should be integrated into the prompt. So an example might be, write dialogue, just an example of dialogue of something that could have been taking place when you're telling your friend about something that happened in one of your specials, like art, PE, music, whatever. As you're doing that, think about using robust adjectives, and make sure that you're highlighting those things physically with a highlighter in your writing. So kids are thinking concretely about those robust adjectives as they're also working on the skill of developing dialogue. So you can see the high levels of accountability there. To go back to what are all the other kids doing while the teacher is working with a small group, what we need to do is ensure that we have a lesson plan or several lesson plans that ask kids to interact with the text with a piece of accountability. So as they are reading, they can find 5 pieces of evidence about the main character, simply 5 words that show the main character's change in mood, nothing more than 5 words on a piece of paper. Ask the students to read aloud with a partner to grow both fluency and comprehension. So there's a lot of data that says when you're doing that paired reading, you're growing your fluency. After reading, kids write down what their favorite moment in the text was, and Jeff and I could be reading together, but my favorite moment might be different from his. And then ask kids to read with another adult in the room. Sometimes when we're at Marathon, we see that there are 3 adults in a classroom with a group of kids, and that's where, we have like our A-paras that we've talked about a lot during budget season. And if you have an A-para who's working with kids, the nice part of that is kids can then self-correct. We're encouraging our teachers not to be afraid to read images, because if you picked an image like the one you see on the screen, kids could be asked to draw an inference based on what they see, which is a comprehension kind of a skill on the literacy side. And then they could also be talking about literary elements such as mood or conflict or character development, and that's on the literature side. We're encouraging people to listen to their kids read aloud, and I know that that was one of the components of Fountas and Pinnell BAS, the benchmark assessment system. And, lots of times we encourage people not to throw the baby out with the bathwater if there's something that really works beautifully. And if you are going to have your kids read aloud, you should be listening for self-correction, because if they come to a place, they make a mistake and they don't self-correct, you know that they just skipped over that and didn't even recognize that they had made an error. They need to reread for comprehension, be attentive to punctuation. They should be able to decode multisyllabic words. You can observe their facial expressions, because that will tell you whether or not they are comprehending. And they should have inflection if they come to a particular mark of punctuation or something exciting or funny, and you should see that as well. We are encouraging formative assessments, and sometimes we say, well, you don't make a pig fatter by weighing it, but in the case of formative assessments, you surely do, because you're asking kids to go back to the learning and think about doing something with it. And so even though you're asking them, you're assessing them in some way to see what they got, because they have to do something, you're building neural pathways. I want to show you this example that came from Sarah Ellum, who's the subject matter leader at the high school. They've done a lot of really deep digging into what is it that our kids need. And so what they have diagnosed is that the kids really need to think about the quality and development of central ideas in their own writing. So are they able to develop a central idea or a thesis, and how good is it? The selection and explanation of evidence, sometimes they just pick things out kind of willy-nilly, or are you picking out the evidence that's very thoughtful and will best support your argument? The organization of their writing, their expression of ideas, and their awareness of the task and the mode. Who's my audience? What's my purpose? So looking at all of those things, they have decided that they're really, really drilling into the quality and development of central ideas and the selection and explanation of evidence. So one thing they're doing is they're actually monitoring individual students. So this is an example of a student who had a 486 MCAS score and a student growth percentile score of 1, which means that when we rank ordered our students, this particular student would have been last in the rank order. So over 2 years, grade 9 and 10, you can see what has happened. The star date you see on the left, and you can see the grade equivalent. So when that person came into 9th grade on September 23rd, took the STAR test, and was at a 4.6 grade level. By January, 5th grade. By May, 5.9. The following September, 7.5, and then the most recent test on January 25th at 8.1. And so we are seeing the kind of growth that we want to see when we actually implement the changes that we're talking about. So overall, in grade 10, we have about a 90% exceeding and meeting the standards ELA score overall. And that's the kind of thing that we really want to see. So this is how the changes to our literacy and instruction happens. I thought it might be interesting to show you that this year because we did so much work last year with the math, and that's all I've got for you. So thank you.
Just a few questions. You highlighted elementary and high school. What happened to middle school?
So I think that when we talk about middle school, we would still do something like that. We have put in a whole lot more text, and we're still doing these kinds of pieces, loads of writing reps. We do some small reading instruction there. We do some whole group reading instruction there. Maybe more whole group than small group, but certainly those things are happening. And our middle school person definitely attends all of these things, too.
We
And
have
when-
less paraprofessionals, though, at the middle school, correct, to help with some of those tier 2 instruction?
Yeah, at the middle school, when we have a co-taught class, it's a special educator and a classroom teacher for the most part. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some B paraprofessionals who go in, or, you know, if a B para is tied to a student, that person would be in the classroom as well.
But would be helping that student, not doing what the A paras do at the lower levels. If there's a para tied to a student.
Yeah, or a group of students, yes. And sometimes, you know, we have a B para that might go into a classroom and doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a student. Yeah, the middle school has no A paras, as you know.
Yeah, that's,
They had eliminated theirs a long time ago.
they also have higher class sizes than elementary school.
Just, you'd be surprised if you looked. Like, the class size thing is a very interesting thing, especially when you get to high school. It's all driven by student
Right.
enrollment. So, you know, you
Middle
could
school,
look
it's-
at,
Everybody's the same.
yeah, like an AP Spanish course might have 14 kids in it, if that's only the number who, you know, signed up. Like you had 20 AP, so that's really big, so we have to make 2 14s. But then you might look at an accelerated geometry class with 26 kids in it. You know, so it's a little bit trickier.
The example of the one student
Yeah,
where they measured so very low, it looks like. That measurement was in 9th grade.
start of 9th, yeah.
So I'm just curious, going off of what Kyla said, what was done to try to support that child in middle school? Like, it seems like, you know, when there's targeted instruction and practice, that's possible. But it just seems like, what
Right.
happened?
Yeah,
that
I
this
don't know
child
who the
got to ninth
student
grade?
is.
Well, sure, but so like, if there's targeted instruction and practice in high school and we're seeing how effective it is.
Yes,
Are we not trying to do that in the middle school?
we
Like,
are, certainly.
Okay, because that is pretty,
Yeah, that growth is profound.
and the number that it starts with is profoundly low.
Yes.
Are these things that, going back to what Sarah's thing about what was being focused on?
Yeah.
Is that what is showing here? That in that class, those were the two skills that they had focused on were?
Yes, so how they come up with that, so they'll say, these are, you know, the kind of things that we see, we really need all kids to know and be able to do. But if we're going to kind of hone in on something, the two things that they as a department, and, you know, they can use STAR data, instructional
Right.
reading level. They can take a look at a kid and ask them to read aloud or to write in class. And they do a lot of that kind of work. So when they drill down, they have decided that that quality of, and development of the central idea, their thesis statement, and then selecting evidence and details, that's what they
Those are the
really
kinds
started
of
to work
things
on.
that- yeah.
One of the things that's interesting here is that what we're talking about to some degree here could be writing, right?
Yes.
Yes. But you can see what it's doing to the reading score. Because the writing, you have to go in and you have to reread those passages over, and that's what when we say writing in the service of reading, that's what we mean. So this particular student, I don't even know if that student went to Hopkinton Middle School, but I could do some digging to see who it is.
In 486 is a passing score on MCAS, is that accurate?
So the proficiency cutoff is at 490, when you hit
Okay.
500, you're proficient. So 499 and below is not proficient. And 470 is the other end. So that person is like right in the middle of the needs improvement category.
And so the ELA SML is shared among the middle and high school, is that correct?
No, the SMLs, ELA, math, science, and social studies are exclusive to the high school. World language goes into the middle school. And then technology engineering also goes into the middle school. But art, PE, music, those folks are K to 12s.
K to 12, okay. And there's not like a specific reading specialist for the middle school?
The middle school right now has a 6 to 8 ELA director she crunches all of the data. She even has now gotten into crunching the math data.
But
because
she doesn't work directly with students?
She mostly works with teachers, helping them to work with students. And like in this scenario, you know, every once in a while, Sarah will see a kid with some need, and because she teaches 2 periods and has 3 off, like she's got the flexibility to go in and work with a student like this. But there's no one at the middle school really, except for the ELA director, who
that.
could possibly do that.
We do allocate some of our Title I funding
To that.
when available
To tutoring.
to put in a Title I reading tutor in at the middle school.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful.
Which year, because I'm trying to think in my head, so this may or may not be a student who went to Hopkinton Middle School.
Yeah.
And obviously, we aren't privy to the individual data of students, but I'm also thinking about this student is in 10th grade now, was in 9th grade at the start of this data collection.
Yes.
When the child was in 6th grade, whether or not they were in Hopkinton, we were still in the pandemic in terms of the state requirements around MCAS, as well as that, I believe, was the year that we didn't we do hybrid learning that year?
2021, we did hybrid learning. So that's 4 years
So that would
ago.
have been 6th
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
kid would have been in the
In sixth.
6th grade.
And the research has been showing that they're not making up the gaps
In Hopkinton, they are,
in Hopkinton, but
yes.
nationally, that
Yeah.
they're not recovering as well as they could be.
Yeah, the Globe is actually running a story soon on if different school districts, kids are bouncing back, and if so, why might that be?
Who's running it?
The Globe, Boston Globe.
Okay.
Can you, I hadn't heard about the Lexile score before. Can you explain that?
Yes, so there are different sort of bands that will tell you sort of at the grade level that your kid is reading. I think when you tip over a book on the back, it will say like RL, and it will give you a number sometimes. Like sometimes it will say like 5.6, and then you realize that's somewhere like in the middle of 5th grade is the appropriate reading level for that particular text. Tim Shanahan, who does a lot of this kind of work, will say that when you're getting instruction with a teacher, you should probably be able to read about like 80% of that text because it's guided. But when you're reading independently, it should be like 95% of that text, right?
So is that something that my kids are still pretty young, but so the Lexile score just refers to any number on the side of a book, or it's something that parents are receiving in progress reports?
No,
or-
they probably wouldn't get it in a progress report. So we have a sense of where that kid is reading, and we do, because we have, a star will say that that kid is reading at benchmark, or it will say, your 8th grader is reading at an 11th grade level, or your 4th grader is reading at a 3rd grade level. And so we try to choose texts that are at the appropriate Lexile level for the reader, given the score,
We used to get letters.
that would tell you.
Yes,
Lexile
that your
level.
child was
Yeah.
a certain letter.
Yeah, we started
Oh,
that
no,
with-
that's FNP,
Yeah.
and that's really not well-backed.
Right. But those of us with old children.
I actually got one of those, and I was very confused, because I was like, oh, I don't think this is, because that's not being used anymore. The
So I think-
letter leveling from FNP.
So what we're not doing is, we're not like, there used to be a time when you would kind of go through that process of figuring out where that kid was reading, and we would say, oh, end of 1st grade, your kid should be at a, no, is it an F, a D? D, I think. Anyway, there's like a great big chart, and so as you're going through that year, you might say, oh, look at that, your child started out the year at an A, and he's really made such great progress, he's already at a C. We're not doing that anymore, but I think sometimes teachers will still talk in those levels. So they may say, oh, by the end of the year, this would be a very good text for your kid to read, and it might be a text that we would have considered a D back in the day. But that kind of assessment is not really happening anymore. Like when we talked about the BAS reading aloud, it's great to have the teacher listen to the student read aloud so that we could do all those things on that list, not so that we can apply a D to them.
Right. We talk about triangulating all these assessments and how we can get the most information the most efficient way. So, Carol talked about not, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We know that there are assessments that we use now and measures that we use to make sure that we're looking at student skill and being able to identify and pinpoint what we want to move forward with. We also know there's value in understanding students' reading behaviors. And so if we look at all of that in concert, we can really make some great decisions about instructional planning. In isolation, we have come to know better than the world was doing up until recently.
And if parents want to request what their child's star score are, they just,
Oh, they can, yes, absolutely.
and that's an email to the teacher directly or to someone else?
No,
Like, because
if
I
it
know
goes-
reading is like a pretty, important issue to many people in our community. So just so
Yeah.
that we,
Yes. If they want to know that, they can send an email to the teacher, we can get that report to them.
Jeff,
Yes.
reading behavior, define that.
Ooh, I don't have my note cards. So a reading behavior is, instead of thinking about specifically what a student is doing or can do, it's, how are they interacting with text? How are they, what are their words per minute? What is their fluency? What are their patterns of behavior when they get to a word that they don't, that they can't grab right away, that they don't have with automaticity? We unfortunately for a long time relied almost exclusively on that, because that was what was really done. And the old adage, when you know better, you do better. We now get to do better than that. But we know that there's still value in understanding what a student's behavior is when it comes to looking at that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. And this will be available up on the,
It sure will be.
where our agendas and things are. Thank you. That brings us into the school committee chair report, and just want to read out payroll warrants S25017, S25018, and S25019 have been approved. Warrants 25-083S, 25-084S, 25-085S, 25-087S, 25-088S, 25-089S, 25-090S, 25-091S, 25-092S, 25-093S, and 25-095S have been approved and included in your folder. Just on the note of email, we obviously received a lot of emails specific to the superintendent search, so we'll get to kind of discussing those later, but did want to point that out. Do people have any liaison reports? Okay. All right, then let's go ahead into our new business item A, which is the Tech FY26 budget and collaborative agreement. Dr.
All right.
Kavanaugh.
So this requires absolutely no action. You know I have sent you the tech budget. It's just over 13 million for this year. That is a 10.8% increase year over year. I don't think we should worry about it being a 10.8% because they have a very, very healthy cumulative surplus at tech. They do the data privacy agreement, they are associated with TECA, the high school, and so there are other revenue streams for them. But the reason that it's important on our agenda, and I didn't know this before, but apparently we get an A+. When DESE has to do reviews of all of the collaboratives across Massachusetts, and so we belong to Accept and we belong to Tech, and when you go through your review with DESE, what they will do is they will look at your member communities, and then they'll go in and spot check your school committee agendas to see if Accept or Tech ever lands on your school committee agendas. And for us, it does. And so we are constantly updating you on what the budget looks like or what's happening at those collaboratives, which is very nice, because there were some other districts that didn't put them on their school committee agendas. So hooray for us. Hooray for Georgette. Yeah.
Name names.
You can
Hold
chastise
on. But I did learn that we got an
Shame them.
A+, so that was great.
Makes us look
And
better.
so it makes us look good.
10%, you said, don't worry about it. Seems like a big percentage increase. Is that typical year over year?
No, that's a little bit unusual for this year. We did look at Tech's tuitions, and, I mean, it's really a great deal,
Okay,
you know.
yeah.
So as a member district, to send children to the Education Collaborative to be educated, the tuition it's wonderful. So
Right.
there's always a benefit in being a member there.
Okay, then that moves us into old business policy IJOA, which is field trips.
All right, so I will tell you about policy IJOA. We started doing this work before the spring elections. And so the current policy working group may not even, well, Susan might be.
We discussed this. I was like, this
Yeah.
doesn't look familiar.
And we had gone back and done this when the previous committee was here. And the only change that we actually made to IJOA was in terms of financial assistance in Category 3 extracurricular trips. And what that really refers to are the overseas trips that kids are taking to, Spain or to Normandy or, to Iceland or wherever it is that they're going. And they are certainly tied to learning in our high school classrooms, but you can certainly take that course, get everything out of it without actually having to travel to Normandy or to Iceland or wherever that trip is going. So the school committee policy is that we really don't assist people with the financial aid for those, or if we do, it's very limited what we can offer, and that's based on demonstrated need. And sometimes there are ways to find financial gifts to offer students, but those are very different from the other categories where we're talking about like athletic trips or STEAM trips or STEAM clubs or music or those kinds of things that our kids are doing.
What is STEAM?
Science, technology, engineering, art,
Oh.
and math. Yeah, anything that falls under that category.
Yeah.
To
STEM. STEM, yeah.
Yeah.
STEAM.
Because weirdly, that really helps the world.
All right, so that is the change to IJOA, and it's connected to the next policy, if I can just jump right in. Sure. So that's policy JLB. And so what you will see in terms of changes there are in the second list of bulleted items, field trips that fall under policy IJOA, field trips category 1 and 2. Those are where we say that the fees are set by the schools. And then the last thing on policy JLB does say that fee reductions or waivers are available for policy IJOA categories 1 and 2 only. And that's for students with need. In category 3, the extracurricular trips, the district may award limited financial aid based on demonstrated needs and availability of funds. So these are here as a paired set, that's all. And somehow they fell off the radar and they're back.
Can you remind me, how many readings did we do of these?
Let's see. We read this policy in April of 2024, and so I'm not sure if
Came back after that.
it came back
Okay.
even after that. I think that probably is, I mean, you might want to just do it one more time.
Yeah,
I think that
That
would be good, since
consistent.
it's been kind of lying on the side of the road for a while.
It sure has, yes. Yep.
Its own
That
little
was a good
program.
metaphor, wasn't it?
Lovely. All right, so
Bus.
that then brings us into item C, which is the final intent to travel, the HMS robotics.
Okay, yep, so this is grade 6 to 8. They are going to VEX World Competition in Dallas, Texas. They are leaving on May 11th, and they will be coming back on May 14th.
Make a motion, move to approve travel to VEX Worlds, May 11th to the 14th, 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Motion by Chris,
Second.
second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
And it is unanimous and passes. That brings us into item D, which is the HPS library grant discussion.
Yes, so Wendy MacArthur, who is our middle school librarian, had written a grant, and I believe that this one was so that she could acquire texts in students' native languages. So if they were ESOL kids and they had just come to Hopkinton, they would be able to, still read in their first language while they were acquiring English. And by all accounts, we loved this, and we were very excited about it. And the Massachusetts Library Board of Commissioners had sent us the DocuSign, and we signed to get the money, and then we learned that that money was no longer going to be available.
And how
So,
much was the amount?
About $4,000, if I'm remembering correctly.
I was just wondering if there was a way we could make up this money, since the grant was, whether we approached the HBTO or HAF or some other association in town that might be willing to,
Yeah, we can look into that.
maybe the South Asian or the Chinese Association, or
Maybe a combination.
maybe a combination, everybody
I know.
chips in a
That'd be
little.
lovely.
Yeah.
That would be really great to not lose these funds.
Okay. All right. So. we'll
So
come back
is
to
there anything we have to do
Yeah.
to make that happen?
No, I think we could probably, internally reach out to the
That would be
HPTO
great.
or HAF or one of those organizations to see if they can help. Yeah, we just met with our HPTO president, and they will be co-presidents next year.
Oh, great.
That's great.
Yeah, they're great.
Great. All right, that moves us then into items by consensus.
Okay. As superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
Okay.
Make a motion to move to approve items by consensus.
Motion
Second.
by Chris, second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous and so moves. Before we go into the next part of the meeting, just want to remind folks at home that we are going to, the rest of our meeting will be broadcast, but not, it'll be recorded, but not broadcast live. We will come back after we have made a selection and notified the candidates of who we have selected. The reason this part is not going live is to allow us the opportunity to notify the candidates personally so that they're not finding out from other sources. At this time, I would also invite if the superintendent and assistant superintendents would like to step out. This is certainly not something that, we're not kicking you out, but not something that you would need to be.
Don't say another word.
We are happy to be dismissed.
Okay.
You can have a cup of coffee, or they could go home early, couldn't they?
They can go home early. They can,
I
so
want to talk to everyone after, so if you guys can just.
wait in the parking lot.
Great. Yeah, just wait
Yeah.
for an hour. or so.
All right. Thank you very much. So.
I'm sure what he has to say is very important, too.
So, and just for folks that are planning to watch until we come back live, we will come back live, but for those who are not, the recording will be available tomorrow. And, we will be back here on April 17th for the regular meeting. So this time, I'm just going to let you guys step out and wait to confirm that HCAM has switched us over to recording but not broadcast.
We need to carry these back again.
Do you want to leave the bag here? Oh,
Yeah,
bring
that's
that in. I'll
okay.
drop it in the morning.
Oh, that's
Are
wonderful,
we
thank you.
good to go? All right, that's great. So I'm just for folks who watch this tomorrow, we did a lot of work into this. We each took different parts and we shared different pieces of it. If we could start just with a little bit of, those who are on the selection committee, do you guys want to just give a little bit without, I know because of confidentiality, we're not able to release the names of people that
Yeah.
you guys interviewed, and the other three of us don't know who was interviewed, but if you'd like
Yeah,
to give
so
a
we
little.
had 30 candidates, which was, from what NESDEC tells us, is much higher than any other school system that they've worked with have gotten. So I think it really speaks to our station of our school system within the state of Massachusetts, and that it's a really desirable place to work. And we had a number of extraordinarily qualified people that we looked at. The committee deliberated, and it was our hope at first to forward 4 individuals for final recommendation. We had a hard time finding 4 that we really, there was one candidate we went back and forth with that we really wanted, but in the end decided that we're not. So we thought we had 3 very strong candidates that we put forward. Unfortunately, as we know, one pulled out, which in reflection, the committee would not have put 3 if they had considered one might pull out. They really would have put 4 or 5
Right, we
together.
might have put that other person on the list.
We might have put that other person on the list. They were a strong candidate. We had some concerns about one particular candidate. We did feel strongly about the 3 that we put together, one pulled out. We do feel like both had very strong characteristics that we put forward. In the screening, the questions were very, we
They
had,
were tailored
Thank you.
and were really to pull out some very explicit qualities and thoughts of the individuals.
in a wide variety of subjects.
Yes.
But they're very pointed, and we weren't allowed to ask follow-ups, nor were they allowed to ask us anything.
And my understanding is that you guys used the profile of the ideal candidate that we had.
Yes,
worked.
absolutely, absolutely. And we had a great cross-section on the committee, for those that aren't aware. We had teachers, administrators, everybody that we've detailed here, parents, members of the community, a diverse representation.
I
It
think
was-
we also benefited because we had at least one that was a crossover, because they were not only, I think they were there
More than
for
one, that
their-
was a
be
teacher and a parent.
And then they on top were a teacher or a administrator. So that was very, very helpful, because they really were able to reflect, and it was good, at least because we got a lot of view from the elementary level, the secondary level, on the quality of the candidates.
And they really kept strongly to the characteristics that we sent out, that we really wanted to make sure that we fit that profile that was put out.
About how many hours would you say went into the meetings themselves?
Oh my gosh. Well, so first of all, to review 30
Resumes.
resumes
Yeah.
and their whole package.
Yeah.
Took enormous amount of
I
hours.
think it-
Susan said she spent an hour on the first one, and then she got a little faster after.
Yeah, and so we had 30, and
Right.
I thought, I don't know how the people who had jobs got them all done, but.
It was rough,
Yeah, I had
coming for somebody who has a job.
notes, yeah.
And then we had two days where we had one day where it was more of a training. The second day is where we narrowed down the 12 that we decided, it was 12 we had decided to interview, and then one didn't show up. So we ended up interviewing 11, I believe.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So we had another day, and that was a tough narrow down to get to those folks.
And then we had another day of developing questions. And that was kind of interesting because what I noticed were the teachers grouped together and were really crafting those questions. And they each kind of took an area and say, okay, we're gonna work on this one, you guys work on that one. And so you kind of had knowledgeable people crafting questions very specific to areas.
Yeah, a budget question, a literacy question, a curriculum question, leadership question, relations with community, parents.
Thank you.
So if you asked hours, I would
lot.
say we worked, 30, 40 hours.
At least, probably closer to 50 if you
Yeah. If you count
include all
reviewing.
the interviews and then the discussions afterwards and the selection and writing notes and things like that.
All right, so we can dive into the two finalists that we had before. Just want to circle back to when we talked with NASDAQ about this process itself. We want to try to keep things positive and talk about the things that we like about the candidates to go on the merits of that itself. But so, do we want to start with, we had,
Mark
the-
McLaughlin?
yeah, but, and talk a little bit about the site visits, because not everybody, I think,
Yeah.
only two of you did site visits, or
3 of us.
three of you. Okay. So can we talk about the site visits first? I don't know who would like to jump in.
Matt and I were on the one for Evan, and it was well organized. Evan had all kinds of refreshments for us. We were trying to give bagels away to every person that came in. Large groups, well chosen.
Am I Matt?
What did I say? Yeah?
I was like, who's
I'm
that?
fine if I'm Matt.
I was
Sounds like-
thinking we were talking about Matt LaFave. so
Chris, I am so sorry. That's what you get for having 2 first names.
No. Nope.
Matthews, Matt.
Masters.
Mass.
Yep.
Oh my
My
God!
middle name
See,
is James. That's
this thing has fried my brain.
It's all good, but
The
so,
screening. So the site visit, the site
The
visit.
site visit. Every group that came in, almost every person spoke. Every person talked about Evan's strong communication skills, his ability to bring people to consensus. His interpersonal skills came through so strongly, and I'm sure that comes from his counseling background. But when he discusses things, they are involves the whole person.
I thought the site visit, I've never been through one. I can't imagine one that would go better for a potential candidate. I would describe the support from every cohort as, in a positive way, as hostile support. Like they are,
Adamant.
like they could not have been more supportive of Evan. And one of the things that I thought was the consistency across the departments, that had the same type of consistent support which I think you can really, which really speaks to Evan as a person and how genuine he is, that whether it was, again, town administrators, principal group, teachers, I mean, it was very consistent. And I was blown away by how supportive, and again, I just kept taking down notes, and I was kind of blown away by how supportive and how unanimous the support was across, there must have been 50 people, 60 people
Probably.
that we met with that day.
Broken
The
into
parent
smaller
group, again,
Yeah.
parent group, yeah, across the 5 or 6 small groups.
I thought it was interesting that the high school representation,
Students, you mean?
no,
Okay.
the teachers that came from the high school were so supportive of him, which would, if he were to become the superintendent, means they're losing this principal that they really like, and yet they really were pushing him forward as a candidate.
Yeah, the support, I think Susan's point, I think that's a strong one, that they're gonna lose, or they may lose their immediate leader, but they recognize how strong he is and what a great job he would do leading the entire district, that they're willing to, see their immediate leader leave, for the kind of greater good of the district, and recognizing what a great job he'd do, and so I think that really speaks again to Evan's character and his leadership, and I think his approach was, and Susan mentioned, it wasn't just, hey, we want kids to get good grades.
Yeah.
We consistently heard that Evan's looking at, kind of the entire student, from, not just kind of the academic part, but almost a holistic approach to, and also to making sure there was support from kids that are on IEPs that have special needs, to kind of what, general ed
Yeah.
students, and then to high-performing students, that he recognizes that each of those kind of buckets of kids have certain needs, and it's important and critical that those needs are met across the district. And I think what we heard, and Susan can confirm this, is that that approach at the high school has been met. That it's not just, hey, we're just gonna focus on the high-performing students, or we're just gonna, focus on kind of the middle bucket of kids, which is the biggest number. We heard consistently that every student, special ed kids to general ed to high-performing, are important, and there's meaningful resources and thought put into delivering the education to each of those, basically to every student that comes through that high school, which I think when we look at a leader across the district, that's also, I think, a really important piece of it, is that we're making sure that every student and their needs are met, again, not just academically, spiritually, holistically, emotionally. I had asked, I forget which group it was, that did someone who kind of entered the teaching world in a guidance counselor position. Is that normal to be someone who leads the district? And is that something that did that give anyone concern, that it wasn't kind of a trained administrator out of college, or someone from the teaching pool? And it was interesting to me and made sense when they communicated that they actually think it's a real positive. And they gave examples of that, of how someone coming through guidance and having that training, especially given the world that we're in today and the challenges that a lot of these kids have in school, whether it's first grade through senior year in high school and beyond, is important. And I think we heard quite a bit, again, from teachers, principals, and basically anyone that works with Evan, that's a real positive and something, it's kind of a feather in his cap, and it made a lot of sense. So it was something kind of that I learned, that it's probably a good person to have that kind of training and experience in the guidance world.
there were also two anecdotes that really had an impact. One came from one of the parents, and I cannot remember her name, but I believe her daughter was being honored with some special award. And-
Yeah.
And she had to go, they had to leave the country for her grandmother's funeral.
That came through in the survey feedback as well.
Okay. That he set up a special ceremony for her. Graduation, had her friends there, all dressed in their gowns, and just recreated for her something very special that otherwise she would have missed out on. And the other one, a woman shared with me going into one of the meet and greets. And we walked in together, and she said that her sons had gotten in trouble. They'd done something, and they had to go into Evan's office. And that was the best thing for them because he really kind of got those boys straightened out. I don't know whether he had a plan that they had to follow in order to make restitution for whatever it was they had done. But she said that really changed them, that they kind of understood now, gee, there are consequences and things like that.
I think one other thing worth noting that we heard a lot is kind of the deep investment that he has in Hopkinton, and that, he's worked here for 20 years. To me, the sense is getting the feedback from teachers, parents, and everyone we met with that. It's not a job to him, it's really I know he's not from Hopkinton, but it's his community. And I think, that level of local investment and familiarity brings kind of a rare level of kind of care and continuity that I think is important. But it was really striking and, again, consistent that Evan cares about Hopkinton, the students, the families, which, again, if all things are equal, I think would be a differentiator. But I think it's really says a lot about Evan and how he feels about the town, the families, but most importantly, the kids.
Are we going to mix everything together, or are we
we are-
going by category?
So we are going to get into that. I was just trying to get kind of the report back.
Yeah.
Because we did not have the
Right.
experience of being able to do that. And I know, Jamie, you
Yes.
both did the in-district day and the site visit for Mark McLaughlin.
Yes, so I drove out to South Hadley. I was joined by a teacher, Jeff Lebrod, and Sheena Martin was there as well.
Oh, I'm just, sorry to interrupt you, but they were also on the other site visit as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. So we met with 6 different groups. Dr. McLaughlin greeted us when we got there, very friendly, and started with the administrators that work in the office. They had shared that South Hadley had been through some tumultuous shifts in leadership in the years preceding Dr. McLaughlin joining the administrative board there. And one of the administrators said that he was the best superintendent of the 10 that she had worked under, which was really sweet. I don't remember which group it was, but more than one of the groups, people were getting teary-eyed, talking about how great he is, how wonderful he's been to work with. They described, these are the administrators, our first group, that he is a big picture thinker. He listens to input from his team. He does not micromanage them. They talked about his commute a little bit and said despite the commute that he does attend community events. They described him holding a budget session to answer questions on a Saturday. And they talked about his joyfulness and kindness in the office. And they felt like that was a significant change and worth noting. And they felt that was really valuable for their experience working with him in the office. They described that he works really hard to build trust and follows through on what he says. And they felt that he was a good mentor. The second group that came in to talk to us were the president and vice president of the Teachers Association. They talked about how he had to step into that position during teacher negotiations. And it had been a very contentious negotiation. And there was a lot of tumult in that initial thing. They ended up going to mediate. Like there was some, kind of complicated process, probably because he stepped into the middle of it. They described feeling frustrated in that initial experience, but that he worked with them to develop a relationship, and they were able to say, we're not always in agreement, but the communication is clear, and that he had developed processes with them in collaboration to support the teacher association, including collaborating on a teacher evaluation system. They talked about times that they disagreed and grievances, and they talked about how the grievance process under Dr. McLaughlin they found to be thoughtful and thorough. They described that he was, in it for the kids, that he always focused on the success of the students. They talked about transparency, having processes. They talked about that fleet of vans that he purchased for out-of-district transport to address budget issues. They talked about how Dr. McLaughlin would meet with the students. When the students had issues or concerns, he would be very open to scheduling meetings with students. They talked about how he works with town leaders and regional leadership. They talked about his student-first focus, and how he sought feedback from the town administrator for public actions, really developing that relationship. And they talked about how when people aren't kind in their work life, that it seems to trouble him. That the kindness is something that they felt was really central to his approach to management. And they said that maybe they felt he was a little less present in community events, but that if he's invited, he will show up. So they didn't feel like that was a disengagement. They talked about how he asks a lot of questions to get to know you. The third group that we saw was the assistant superintendent, the director of technology, and the director of student services. And they talked about how he respects the expertise of the director of student services. He worked really hard with his assistant superintendent to balance expectations and cooperative conversations. They worked on coaching and mentoring with him because the assistant superintendent came from a more business background. They lighthearted said that meetings have run long sometimes because he's listening to others and he wants to understand everyone's process and perspective, but that when pressed, he will tighten it up and get through. Technology director talked about how Dr. McLaughlin was not particularly tech comfortable when he first came to the district, but he really developed those skills in conjunction with Steve, the director of technology, and that was a huge, growth curve while he was there. And he helped to lead the movement towards that standard-based report card that we've been doing in Hopkinton for a while. Then we met with some of the principals. We had the pre-K to 1, the 2 to 4, and the high school principal that came in. They talked about how relationships they've experienced under different superintendents have been based in fear or collaboration. They felt that Dr. McLaughlin really focused on collaborative relationships, and that he's helped them navigate challenging moments in their district with dignity and listening to everyone involved. They talked about his team building and forward focus, and that he encourages dissenting voices openly to have those conversations. Then we met with the school committee chair and vice chair. They talked about how they tried to keep him. They tried to offer travel stipends and hotel stays and, really tried to see if they could keep him there because he's been working so incredibly well with them. They talked about his collaborative public budget process, positive community relationships outside the school. And they said that, he was helping manage their MSBA project. Almost done. The town leaders had so much good things to say about him. The town manager particularly would have regular phone conversations with him during his commute, so they would touch base. One of the things that really impressed me in that conversation was they were describing the outreach to the Council on Aging, the senior center. And so the town manager described that she found that when she was interacting with seniors in the community, they would say, before Dr. McLaughlin started, oh, those schools are so expensive, blah, blah, blah. And then after he'd been there for a while and was meeting with them and doing outreach, she would hear, kind of that same group of folks say, well, the schools are really important. We need to find a way to support this, which I thought was really lovely that he, clearly was showing that outreach to other folks, not just those working under him in the school or the families in the school. And I think the biggest theme that I received that day was really the empathy, the kindness that everyone described, and just how much South Hadley seemed really sad that he's not going to be able to stay on with them.
One of the things that Jamie mentioned that kind of jogged my memory that we consistently heard about Evan was, and I think it's, a sign of a strong leader, is that when he didn't, when he needs to seek out information on a subject that maybe he doesn't know as well as others, he takes the initiative to learn from those who understand it better. And again, that's something we heard from a few of the different groups, where he doesn't, come across as, okay, I have all the answers, I'm the leader, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do. And we heard that, there's a lot of kind of empathy in his decision-making, and he's really thoughtful about finding solutions, especially when it's on a subject or something he doesn't know about, which, again, I thought was something worth noting from the site visit.
Question for you, Jamie. How many people did you meet with in South Hadley? How many were in?
So 6 groups, and there were 4 or 3 in each, so around 20.
Okay.
Oh, and their food service, they have a VOTEC program at their high school, and their students that are studying culinary arts made lunch for us. And the farro salad was delicious, and they made way too much food, but it was very sweet. Thank you, South Hadley students.
I went around in the in-district day with Evan, which started with a lunch with the administrators. Really felt like he commanded their attention. They were really, it appeared invested, and I think that's reflected in the survey data that we received. I tried to track who we were getting responses from. It appeared that we did receive almost every, if not every, central administrator had sent in a survey in support of Evan, that they seemed really wowed to really feel like he was a very strong candidate and seemed to be somebody that they look up to and respect, just watching the room. The other piece that, jumped out at me is that he has, and I know he mentioned it here as well, the positive culture survey that he did amongst the staff. First, I think it's a great sign that he's looking, and that's a piece that I have heard consistently about him, is that he's looking for feedback constantly, but that he had 100% of the respondents that reported that it was a positive culture at the high school. I think it's hard to get people to agree on a lot of things in different groups. We have a pretty significant size staff in our high school. Going around, touring the different buildings, a couple of things jumped out at me. We started at Marathon because that's where the lunch was, and he was really engaged with students, obviously, first, and we heard a lot of about Evan, about how he's very student-focused, student-first. But he was talking on the tour with the Marathon principal. I know he's been to Marathon, obviously, before, but not in this capacity, about how he really wants to attend community events in each school and community-wide, and talking with her about how she felt about having him in, if he was selected as superintendent, to be able to attend some of the Marathon events, which, there are our youngest learners. They had some very funny reactions to him of, oh, wow, you're so tall, and things like that. But he would get down on their level and really interact nicely with them. That continued kind of through each school, where he really got down and talked with the kids, asked them questions about what they were doing, engaged with them. When we got to the middle school, there were an overwhelming number of kids in the classrooms we went to who had had siblings that had been in the high school. And it was like, obviously, they didn't know which classrooms we were going to, so nobody knew he would be coming in, but a lot of kids would say, oh, hey, do you know so-and-so? And he always knew the kid. It was, to me, amazing that he would say, oh, is that your brother or your sister? And they'd say, yeah, and he'd say, oh, they had a really good season at a particular sport, or they're away at whatever school right now. How do they like it? And that ability to connect with people, the ability to remember people's names, and I know that's something that he excels at. I did see in our survey data, one of the students reporting that he knows every single student's name. That wouldn't entirely surprise me. I know that I have heard that consistently from people.
And the one student noted that he remembered what college she was going to, and I think
Yeah.
her major?
Yeah, it really, it really wowed me. And I think when we're looking at kind of what side by side, I think both candidates had a lot of really positive things that were brought out in this process. But I would say that what I saw of Evan was different than what we see kind of at a high school principal level, but I was really very impressed and wowed by it. I had never heard of the hostile support, but that I can see from the emails and the number of surveys and whatnot that we received in support of him.
Yeah, I think that we're at risk of damaging morale in the district if Evan's not chosen as the next leader. I mean, the support has been that overwhelming. Site visits and then emails and then anecdotally around town. You know, I also look at kind of with a position of this much importance, which I think in our town, it's you could argue it's maybe the most important position. That mitigating that risk is also something to consider. He's a known commodity. You know, I think Mark, again, has a great resume and could do a good job, but he's an unknown, and I think Evan offers that kind of rare combination of, you know, the performance and then predictability, and goes back to someone who's so invested in this community. And the feedback we got through the search is that there was a lot of people who applied, but the bench wasn't that deep, and it wasn't an overly impressive group of 30 applicants. And the feedback from NESDEC, and then, again, anecdotally, is that the bench is pretty short for potential superintendents. And if we have someone who I think checks every box and is so invested in this town and the families and the kids, and is not an unknown, I think that mitigates some risk, and you know, we'd love to have a long-term leader, and I think, you know, based on everything we've heard about Evan and hearing from Evan directly in the interview, you know, he wants to be in Hopkinton, and having a strong leader who we could have here for the next 10 to 15, 20 years till he retires, I think is worth taking into consideration.
When I was doing reference checks, I'll speak to Mark first, was that the chairman of the school committee was just effusive with praise for him. The first one I called, because it's always the first person I want to talk to, was their association president. You don't frequently hear an association president say, this guy is really great. And in doing some additional checking today on him, was that he came in to a really tough situation, because he came in as assistant superintendent. And the person who was superintendent, I think it was a few months before he was put on took a 9-month paid leave. Don't know what was going on there, but it was, I know that the person he took the place of had really destroyed the negotiations process and had gotten temperatures very high. When I was checking Evan's references, this is going to sound, I don't know, but I couldn't get them to shut up. Every time they saw me, heard me, they'd call me at home, you know. One of the things that was said was about Evan's way of looking at things. And the person compared the interviews between the two and said, Evan is really student-focused. That's the most important thing for him is the student, what's going on there. That person observed that Mark tended to like systems. I don't know if that's valid, I'm not sure. I do know that almost every person who has worked with Evan has stellar things to say about them.
I do feel, in the Mark thing, I do feel that you could geek out with Mark and talk educational philosophy for
Yeah.
hours.
Yes.
And that was a really, his answers to questions, both in the first screening interview and the second, were on that, right?
So
The geek out?
Yeah.
I'm going to piggyback off of you on references. I spoke with school administrators in both South Hadley and here. I also spoke with the building committee chair in South Hadley as well as the select board chair here. I also wanted to go a little bit deeper, and NASDAQ had said it was okay to do so. I spoke with a number of people who had worked with him in Merrimack, New Hampshire, to get just looking to get from both candidates some feedback that was not directly with people they're currently working with.
Right.
And also because it felt like the feedback that I was getting on both of them was positive. I would say I experienced something similar when I was talking with Evan's people that he had selected, that they had a lot to say, and potentially that I'm going to take Chris's phrase, that hostily supportive, that they really very, very supportive. And I called some administrators who previously worked with Evan who are no longer in the district. The feedback I was getting is that he's really, in one person's view, had said, Evan is unparalleled in his abilities as a school administrator. He has a sincerity, a depth of knowledge, and a very natural leader. I also heard from a couple of people with regard to Evan that he, even when the decision is tough, and it's not a decision that is necessarily popular with everybody, he makes the tough decisions and he helps people to understand the why. And that in cases, there were people that I spoke with that could speak to decisions that they may not have independently come to, but when they saw why he made the decision, they were able to say, aha, that's vision. So that's, in speaking with the former administrators, who, by the way, I don't know that Evan knows I called them. He certainly didn't say, hey, call these people. I spot called them because I was, able to easily find who they were and figure out their contact information. They were incredibly, almost even more so than the people that Evan had put forward, incredibly positive. So that's, kind of where I was with references.
Which is impactful as well.
Very impactful, and I in some ways, almost more impactful to me,
course.
that the people that he wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that I was talking with, I received, as I'm sure everybody did, a lot of unsolicited
Yeah.
opinions
Yes.
on the sidelines of different things you're doing in the community, which, when I say unsolicited, it was very much wanted, but I wasn't going around
Yeah, I think
harassing everybody I
the
knew.
people that Evan and Mark put forth for the site visits, they chose them. And
Right.
not to
Right.
say they're just going to be cheerleaders, but I think the unsolicited or the spot checks where they have nothing to gain and probably caught them off guard, that they echoed a lot of what we heard from those that, at least that Evan put forth, I think carries a deeper meaning.
And also from a diverse spectrum of the community.
Yeah.
All very positive, which is very telling. It's not just the smart kids or the parents or, you know what I mean?
I was struck by that as well, and also struck by the number of students or former students that took time to write lengthy
Oh, yeah.
pieces.
Yeah, we actually heard, when you mentioned it, about how he's able to communicate decisions that some may not like you know, he knows how to sell the story is a kind of a negative connotation, but he knows how to communicate to the different groups. And again, when there's a decision they may not like, he knows how to is strong with his messaging, which again, as someone who's the leader of the district, that's going to be important because he's going to make a lot of decisions that parents may not like, or teachers may not like, or some groups may not
Yep.
like. And we had, Susan and I had kind of pressed the group and said, hey, can he also make tough decisions? And if there's an underperforming teacher or someone that he may have a relationship with as a principal who may have been in his building, and they emphatically said, and they gave some examples, that he's able to make a tough decision, and if someone's underperforming, that you know, I think it was said that he puts the needs of the kids ahead of any relationships that he has, and he's able to make those tough decisions, which I think, again, we need from a good leader.
One of the anecdotes I got from references, one on Evan, was an individual who had a person in his department who just wasn't up to snuff. And the teacher saw, he was a subject matter leader, and the teacher saw something in this younger teacher and recognized this guy can be a great teacher, but we've got to work with him. And he approached Evan about it and said, listen, I'd like to try some things. I'd like to move him around. And Evan gave him a free rein on that. And the teacher that he worked with has turned out to be one of the best ones in the building. And that spoke highly of Evan's ability to trust in his people, too. The other thing that was shared with me was that this particular individual had seen Evan give chance after chance after chance and worked with people and just said, really sorry, but it's just not working. And I don't think I've seen too many teachers let go in my years, so that says a lot.
I also think the fact that we received over 300 pages of survey responses
Yeah.
on Evan, which were largely very positive, and some very, very highly positive.
I think there were 249 for Evan and
But the-
43 for Mark.
Right, I don't think we can take the volume.
No.
Like, just because, just to
Yeah.
be fair.
But I
Yeah.
think my point is as a percentage of the amount of feedback that
Yeah.
we
Yes.
received, it felt
overwhelming.
very overwhelmingly
Yes.
in favor of Evan. I also heard from many people that he builds good teams, that he builds strong teams, that he's a great
Good listener.
collaborator, great listener.
Came out a lot. And I also feel that I think is very important, our superintendent has a lot of interaction with parents and parents who are unhappy sometimes with things going on. And I feel that building those relationships and being able to be firm
Yeah.
is important.
I
Sorry.
realized that I
Came through.
didn't yet report on the references that I called.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
And I also didn't talk about Dr. McLaughlin's site visit to Hopkinton. So I'll briefly talk about that. The administrator lunch, I don't think was as smooth as it sounds like Mr. Bishop's was, but Dr. McLaughlin's never been in that space. There's no friend, there's no one that he knows in the room. So I think that he, communicated well, he was friendly with everyone, but probably didn't feel as comfortable as Mr. Bishop probably did. But during the walkthrough, he was praising all of the individual, the swag and the decorations and things that really align with the CRIOP that Dr. Kavanaugh has talked about outside every classroom. And he would comment on the different words that he saw, and kids were waving at him, and he would ask a lot of really really interested questions. He was really thrilled by the raised garden beds outside Marathon that are used for different science class, work. I think for a first grade teacher runs that one. At Elmwood, we had a lovely tour with Mr. Bronninger. And, I have a daughter in that building. And so, I saw her and she ran over. And then we were in another classroom, and a friend's child who happens to have special needs, said hi to me really loudly, and I greeted him. And I think at the listening session later, that friend brought her child to the session, and he remembered that child's name.
Yeah.
And said hello by name. And he was really effusively enthusiastic about every classroom. When we went into a classroom and saw some learning, he would make some positive comments to the principal on the way out of the door, which was, really lovely. Just enthusiastic and invested, I think, in the site visit and driving around. And even because I drove him between the buildings, each trip, he would just remark on how exceptional our Hopkinton education community is, which was really lovely to hear. References that I called, I spoke with parents in Hopkinton and South Hadley, and I spoke with some community leaders in Hopkinton and South Hadley. So from the parents, I got, I think that heavier volume of effusive praise for Mr. Bishop, but similar themes of praise for Dr. McLaughlin. Both had, very pleasant, communication, collaborative, presence, supportive. I got more personal stories, like heartstrings tugging about Mr. Bishop, but I also would sort of expect that he's been in the district a lot longer. So people have had long-term relationships with Evan Bishop, which does not discount how important those are. I think those were incredibly valuable. I heard that same uplifting story about the girls' graduation. I also spoke to, something else that came up on Mr. Bishop was a reverse mentoring with prior students, where he invites prior students in to share things and help him form the way that he's leading the high school. I thought that was really valuable and really lovely, with that humility and kindness in the way that he approaches his former students as people, not just numbers. And every time someone told me a story about how they individually felt that their family or child benefited from either leader, I would ask, that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you feel like that was specific to just you, or did this person go above and beyond for other families too? Both sides, both Evan Bishop's and Dr. McLaughlin's references would say, oh, I saw him do this type of thing with other people also. So I thought that was lovely. It's not just, a favoritism or a special case. It's going above and beyond for everyone, which was really great. Speaking with the community leaders, in Hopkinton, I think I can share that I spoke with the police department chief and the fire chief. I caught the fire chief unawares. I didn't reach him by email because he was off at a training. And so I just sort of caught him on a Saturday afternoon. I felt guilty about a cold call.
Did you run into I was thinking
No,
maybe you
I
ran
just-
into the firehouse.
No. But despite catching him completely unawares, he was, really remarked on how wonderful it's been to work with Evan Bishop and how positive that relationship has been. Our police chief similarly talked about how Mr. Bishop is good in a crisis, supportive of the relationship building between the police department. I asked both of those men, how do you feel Mr. Bishop would do building those relationships with the broader community, reaching outside of just our school community? And they both, as well as the leader of SACH and the Mental Health Collaborative, who I also spoke with, they all felt that Evan's ability to build connections and relationships were a strength of his, and that he would build on the work that he's done as high school principal, were he to be selected for this superintendent role. Dr. McLaughlin's district, South Hadley, that police chief also felt that Dr. McLaughlin is extremely supportive and collaborative with the police department. They'd made some tough decisions, they'd gone through some ups and downs, and she always felt that he was very respectful to her and her position. One of the things that I remember her remarking on was that it's not always true that uniformed officers feel valued and supported by folks in leadership in schools, but that he was very supportive and respectful and appreciative of all their work, which I think would be appreciated in our community as well.
Yes.
Not that our police chief didn't specifically say that, but I asked about those relationships, and he confirmed that Evan Bishop has a good relationship with the officers that he interacts with. And I think that's, I think I've caught my themes. Okay, thank you. I wanted to catch up and make sure I didn't leave any of that out.
You know, Nancy, I think one of the things that I think about a lot as, you know, we're all elected officials. You know, we're chosen by the community to represent their interests on the school committee. And I think it seems the overwhelming support that Evan's received from those same from those same voters, it's very meaningful to me. And I think it's maybe part of the responsibility we have is to make sure we
Read
listen.
every single word of
Y-
that.
Yeah, from the community. You know, I learned through this process that, to me, Evan's a superstar, and it feels that everyone who interacts with him feels the same way, you know, teachers, administrators, parents. I don't know what the next step is. I mean, can we make a motion?
If we feel like we have a consensus, we can have a motion put out.
I'd
and
like
we
to
can
make a
test it.
point.
Yes.
I came back to the focus group information, and the first prompt was, I think the new superintendent should possess the following qualities. And I went through there and highlighted, they want to join a team, they speak well, someone who recognizes the struggles and inspires us to achieve, relationship-driven, builds a culture of trust, collaboration, and improvement, wants to have conversations with teachers, prioritizes kids and visits classroom, promotes work-life balance, models connections, not just talking points. I look at these, and I know these are all qualities that Hopkinton wants in their administrator. And as Chris said, there were so many surveys that came in for Evan that they seemed to think that I think we got more the meet and greets. There were so many surveys that were returned, and yet you didn't see a lot of people at like the meet and greet or focus groups and things like
Felt like
that.
they knew
one
them
that-
already.
The one that I heard because I know some of them were not, had low attendance, but the one that I heard that was very well attended or better attended was the one that Evan did with the staff,
Teachers,
which was not something that, I did attend both community ones, because I was trying to get a good sense of being able to balance who each candidate was.
I did come in, I thought I was late for the meet and greet for the community with Dr. McLaughlin. And I was quite impressed that it turned out they were 2 or 3 teachers, elementary teachers, they had theirs. And that he had pulled up a chair and they were talking about all kinds of things, and he was quite engaged, yeah, thank you.
Anybody feel like they have anything that would be different to add to this conversation that we have not? Or does anybody feel like we are at a point where we could entertain a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to move Evan Bishop forward as the next superintendent.
I'll second.
Motion by Chris, a second by Kyla, and that would be contingent, I think you meant to say, on successful contract negotiations.
Sorry, yes.
Yes, okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it is unanimous. At this point, Jamie and I will go and I will call Evan, if you would call Dr. McLaughlin. We will take a very brief 5 minutes to do that. We will return here. When we return back at this table, we will go live to announce to the community who our chosen candidate is. And then at at that point, we'll go into executive session to discuss the contract. I'm going to give you, don't have the number, right?
I was like,
We took care of the items by consensus and all the other
Yes. We
We
business.
did, but we'll just come back.
we have to come back to go to executive session.
Yes.
So we got,
I assume we're still recording.
so I think Jamie and I will step out. I'll go into that.
Depends how quick they are. So don't say anything. Yeah, okay.
Want to say hi to anyone at home?
Hi, nobody
wouldn't hear
watches
it.
at my house.
They wouldn't hear it in Pittsburgh.
My wife watches to make sure I don't say anything that she'll,
Hi,
that will,
Mrs. Masters.
that will embarrass her, so.
He is an embarrassing person.
I know, I get it, I know.
I think I finally
I agree.
have your name.
Chris.
Chris?
Yeah. I don't really care what you call me. Matt, Chris. I just wanted to make sure I knew I was who you were talking about. People
Mr.
call me
Di-
my brother's name a lot. Doesn't matter to me.
Mr. Dimples.
Yeah, that's it. I can take that. I like that.
You have the dimples Mara Healy has. She's got the
Oh,
cutest
she got the
dimples.
cute dimples too? Oh, all right. Cute dimples. All right. Me
Yeah.
and Mara. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
She was a basketball player instead of hockey player.
All right. That's okay. That's allowed. You
Yeah.
can play basketball. That's fine. That's fine.
Lieutenant Governor was a basketball player too, wasn't she?
I think so. She's tall.
And
Governor's
Mara
not.
is
I have a nice picture of
exceedingly
me with her
short.
if you'd like.
She must have been a guard then.
Is that what guards can be short?
They're typically the shortest.
Is that they can wrap
Forwards
around
are-
legs?
Yeah, they're small, shorter, usually quicker. They can. I don't know. I mean,
What do you
forwards
know?
and
You're a
that's right,
hockey
that's
player.
right. Forwards and centers are typically tallest or
Mm.
taller. Although now the kids are so athletic, even the tallest kids can be guards. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure people didn't expect to get some in-depth basketball talk.
No.
If anyone's actually watching. Or when this is
Maybe he can,
broadcast.
maybe he can splice the tape.
That's right, yeah, yeah,
Like he can cut that section out.
that's right, yeah.
If not, I could come in and edit it for him. My master's was in TV production.
Oh, there you go. You
Yeah.
should run that then. Should go talk to Bob and,
You know, I thought about coming in and volunteering, but I was afraid I would get stuck doing basketball games and things like that. And,
Here, let me see if I can find a picture of me and the governor.
maybe you and I should have a show on HCAM.
Me and you?
and
Yeah.
Chris.
Oh, that'd be
I would
great.
watch that.
oh my goodness. Can you imagine that?
Coffee with Chris and Susan.
Yeah, coffee with Susan and Matt.
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta find, here is that picture. I think I went too far. Picture of me with the governor.
You can, where was it taken? You can, I find it's easier for me to
Oh,
find
to
pictures when I
search?
search the location. I sometimes, like if I know I was,
Oh, you're trying to
like, were
find
you
a
at the
picture?
State House or?
We were not. We
Oh.
were at a child care center
Oh, okay.
in the Cape, which
Oh.
can be a bit difficult. It was for my program.
Um,
Oh, this was another one. We had, I have two pictures with the governor.
I have to see her
This
dimples.
is one. I don't know if you can see very well. So,
oh,
me and my colleagues.
okay. Make sure we see the dimples.
Oh, yeah. All right, yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, mine are better, but that's okay.
Male and female dimples are different.
Yeah, but she has nice dimples.
Man. And she's not very tall. Do you have an idea what her height is?
She's usually at a podium when I see her.
She's really short. I think I'm 5'4", 5'5", somewhere in between there, and I'd say she's probably my height or less.
Man,
Well, the
could you
lieutenant
see her in
governor
that-
is tall.
See her, oh, yeah, they look
Who
like,
is?
as my mom,
The lieutenant governor's tall.
as my mom would say, Mutt and
I have a
Jeff.
picture of.
Mutt and Jeff?
They were radio personalities in
Yeah, you
the
don't know Mutt and
thirties
Jeff?
and forties, and one was real tall and one was real short.
Oh,
That was one of my
This is
mother's
what you
favorite
get for
things.
having an older, considering my parents would be centennial now if they were still alive.
in the
Well,
30s
My
and
parents used to
40s.
like that, but they weren't.
Mutt and
I don't know,
Jeff?
But they weren't born until 46, so I don't know.
Well, it's still within the,
Yeah,
and probably their parents said
it was probably their parents,
Yeah.
yes. My,
Yeah.
yeah, my grandfather would have been
I'm listening to a really neat book.
90 in 2010, so.
It's called The Librarian of Burned Books.
Oh, is it good?
It's interesting. It has 3 characters. It takes place in pre-Hitler's coming into
I was
power.
gonna say, is this
Yeah.
in Nazi Germany?
Yeah, and
As he
you-
was rising up?
yeah, and you've got one character who's in the United States. She's an author, young author, and she's been brought over to Germany for like a cultural exchange. And then one is a Jew who escaped from Germany, got into France, is where she is. And the third one is an American woman whose husband has died in the war, and she works for the organization that made the books that they sent to the soldiers.
This is all like late 30?
30,
As soon as we sit down, we're ready to go live.
Okay,
we're hoping
We're
that,
having a book club.
yeah.
yeah, we're hoping
And
that.
Susan and I are gonna start a show on HCAM together.
Yeah,
That sounds lovely.
Yeah.
I said I'd watch that, no problem.
All right, are we live? Okay. Good evening and welcome back. Just returned from making phone calls in the other room, but we did want to announce before we go into executive session that a few minutes ago, we voted unanimously to enter into negotiations with Evan Bishop as our next superintendent. So wanted to make sure that people had that information before we end the public session for tonight. We had a lengthy discussion about the candidates and want to thank everybody for all of the feedback you've given, the participation of staff and administration and community members, students as well, through this process. So I would thank everybody, and I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session at this time for the
I'll
reasons.
make a motion to enter an executive session. I don't have it up, sorry.
It's- I think you were going to say to comply with or act under the authority of MGL C30AS 21A2 for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to collective, it's not actually collective bargaining with the new superintendent, because discussing in open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the school committee's bargaining position, and to adjourn from executive session.
that was exactly what she was gonna say.
Second.
I felt like it was. Okay, motion by Kyla, second by Chris. We'll do a roll call, starting with you, Chris.
Yes.
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 I am a yes, and we are exited out of the public session at 8:58. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a good night.
Do we leave these?